Okay, I'm going to talk today about cause and effect in my life, but I'm hoping that as I speak, you will think about cause and effects in your own lives. Um, so here is a fundamental question. Do people think there is a relationship between the things they think and they do and the things that happen to them? Anyone says yes? Let's see a show of hands. Absolutely. Are there people who haven't yet discovered fundamental relationships between the things they do and the things that happen to them? Actually, I'm sure you have. There's often a very clear relationship, actually. Um, and we don't have to look very far. I think everybody knows that if we study hard, we're going to get better results at school or whatever than if we don't. If we make an effort, we want to learn an instrument and we practice, then we get better and better at it. Um, I mean, there are many things that this is just a random list I put together, thinking of my son who likes to ride his mountain bike down very rocky passages, and before that, a motorbike. You play dangerous sports or engage in sort of risky activities, then there's a higher risk of physical injury. Um, Overeating, that's myself and our cat. You can become overweight. Uh, but more kind of fundamental things, and people realize this because we understand chapter 2 and the issues that arise from that. Committing adultery will lead to the breakdown in marriages and families, and people can see that happen even if they don't think about it at the time. But sometimes the relationship between the things that happen in our lives and the things that we've done, maybe we don't see them. I think a lot of people say, why is this happening to me? I didn't do anything wrong, or I didn't do this or that. And that's much more difficult to see. And that's what I want to explore a little bit in this sermon. So I think there are two immutable facts of life. I think you can understand the first. Every action has consequences, you know, um, even if it's, in relationships, most especially, things and words we say, but things that we do have consequences. The second is kind of a saying that was, or an aphorism that I learned over 40 years ago, and I feel it's very valuable. You pays your money and takes your choice. In life, we are presented with choices the whole time. We make decisions. We go this way, we go that way. And the way we decide to go will have different consequences. Now, the problem we face is that often when we make decisions, we don't know what the consequences will be. So that makes life more difficult. So one of the consequences of getting old is that your eyesight's not so good. So people do things, and even in their life, sometimes force of circumstances may make them make choices that they feel, well, it's not right, but I feel compelled to do it. So what I want to do at this point is introduce an economics term. It's because I have a background in economics, I guess. So I need to get it into the sermon, moral hazard. It's something actually that we read about, or you might have read about, discussions of moral hazard. Has anyone come across this term? So it actually came out of the insurance industry because they discovered that when people took insurance, it altered their behavior and therefore altered the risk. So as an insurance company, you could work out from statistics what's the risk of my house burning down or car accidents or whatever it is. But they found that when people took insurance, maybe they were a little more reckless. And more houses burnt down, or there were people feel like, well, it doesn't matter if I write off my car because the insurance will pay for it. Of course, no one in their right mind thinks like that. But if you've got an old car, people tend to behave maybe a little differently. But an extension of that was in 2008 when we had the financial collapse, and the whole idea was the banks are too large to fail. And people made decisions that passed enormous costs on to the public or onto other people. And I like the fact that the word moral is in here because it's been recognized actually as a moral issue, an issue of morality. So it's defined as a situation in which one party engages in risky behavior or fails to act in good faith because it knows the other party bears the economic consequences of their behavior. So let's now take that concept and apply it to our lives. I developed the term personal moral hazard, and I started to think about some examples in life, and in my life too, where this concept of moral hazard comes into play. It says effectively you are engaging in actions that pass the cost onto someone else. Now, I've just got some random ones here, but shoplifting is something that happens. I don't suppose many of us do it on a regular basis or even at all. But actually, my first experience and last experience of shoplifting came when I was 7 years old. And I came home with a sweet from the sweet shop that I passed on my way back that I hadn't paid for. And my parents were really mad, and they took me back to the sweet shop, and they made me pay for the sweet out of my pocket money and apologize to the sweet shop owner. And actually, I have never consciously taken anything from shops since then. But things you see, there's certain things that really irritate me. When I go into stores and I see people lined up returning clothes to stores, often you buy stuff, it doesn't fit, so you take it back. But I think there's sort of a tendency sometimes for people to buy clothes for an occasion. You're going to a party, you need a nice dress, you carefully take off the labels, you wear the clothes, make sure that they're all sort of clean, put the labels back on and take it to the shop the next day. All sorts of examples. You can think of hundreds of examples yourself. Borrowing a younger sibling's train card in order to get a reduced fare. Scraping a car in the car park. Actually, this happened to me recently. Someone went into me and it cost quite a lot to repair the dent. I could have left the dent in the car as a memento, but I decided to take it out. But it also brought back a memory of my wife, actually, when she had joined the church in San Leandro, was it? And she had been in a car park, and she'd hit another car, and she went to her central figure and said, I hit this car in the car park. It was just a small scratch. He says, oh, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. So, but maybe what goes around comes around. But it's not just for small amounts. COVID has really extended the opportunity for people to kind of engage in activities that steal from the public purse, really. And one of them is B-bills loans. You may not have heard of these, but these were loans that governments made available of £50,000. And they did this about a year ago. So the loans were available, £50,000. My company took one. We're paying it off month by month. But you had to be generating over a certain amount of income in order to be able to apply for a loan. But because the people who were giving out the loans were doing it on behalf of the government, and they only had to get people to sign a piece of paper that said, oh yeah, I've got this company and it's making this much money, and then they would give the money. And what happened, it became very heavily exploited. There were people who sort of kind of bought up old companies that had done nothing and applied for the loans with no intention of paying it back. So that's rather an extreme, and that's going to be paid for out of taxpayers' money. But there's a lot of other wasted stuff that will also be paid for out of taxpayers' money. And the last one, taking a face cloth from a hotel. And this leads to a very personal story. But you've been in hotels, yeah? And you see all the nice things. And, you know, the soap, well, I think the soap's okay, you know. The shampoo. But what happens when they got really nice towels and things? Pardon? Fluffy towels, yeah, really nice. So it kind of raises a question. Now, I've listed sort of negatives that happen, but there's also positives. You can do things that sort of build up credit the other way. But these are things that I think maybe happen in people's lives in some form or another. But people think, oh, well, it doesn't matter. They're very large. I heard a story of people buying more on Amazon that they need in order to avoid paying the postage fees. I don't want to give you ideas here, but to avoid paying the postage, and then they return the excess. I mean, to me, it sounds like an awful lot of trouble to go to save on the postage, but you know, there's no judgment here. Everybody is in different situations. So the face cloth. Now, if I went into anecdotal experience, I could probably stand here for about a day and a half. But I want to talk about the face cloth because it was so evident that I could not avoid the fact that there was a connection between cause and effect. And at the time, I come out of university, and I was working. I was working for IBM, and they had sent me somewhere, and I was staying in a hotel. It was a nice holiday, and I think, and they had lovely face cloth. And I thought, I will take this back. It's a nice white face cloth, and I took it home, started using it. After about a week, I came to wash my face, and there was an excrement all over the face cloth. And I thought, this is very odd. Now, it was nice cloth, so I didn't want to throw it away at that point. So I washed it, put it in the washing machine. I boiled it, actually, to sterilize it, and started using it again. And about a week later, the same thing. It was amazing. Now, I considered myself, I was on some sort of spiritual path at the time. And I think if you're on a spiritual path, then the effects come back an awful lot quicker. There was a rational explanation. Do you want to hear it? Yeah, I guess we haven't got this far. Uh, I had the downstairs apartment, and a woman upstairs had a daughter, and she would go out in the garden and play. And when she came back, she would use the bathroom in our downstairs apartment rather than go up the stairs. Uh, but because we just kept the toilet paper on the shelf, she couldn't reach it. So the only thing she could reach was the nice white face cloth. So that was the explanation. But it's remarkable. You know, these are two things that happen, and I couldn't but help say, I am being taught a lesson here, even about very small things. So many things have happened. I don't know about you, but I really feel that we live magical lives. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about how I think this all fits together. But even joining this movement, in about 75, 76, I had two very good friends from university. And they got married in Thailand. The girl's parents worked for UNESCO, and they were in Southeast Asia. They had the wedding in Thailand. I went out there, I was best man. And after the wedding, we traveled and saw a bit of the country, and we were on a coach. And there was a woman at the front, and people were kind of leaving their seats and going up and coming back. And my friend said to me, "Oh, she's a really amazing palmist. You should go along and see what she has to say." So I went along and I presented my hand, my palm, and she looked at it and she refused to read it. And my friend's mother was sitting next to her, and she is a lovely woman, wonderful woman. She's a Christian woman. And she turns around to the palmist and said, "Can I say a prayer for him? Or shall I say a prayer for him?" So she did. And I didn't really think much of it. Things happened in my life after that, and I won't go into details, but if I can retire, I might write the book. But I found myself back in Thailand about 3 years later, and I met a young man. He's the brother of someone we will know if we know the South London community. It's Russell Goff's brother, actually, who I discovered later on a bus. And I don't know if I've told you this story before, but he says to me, "What's the purpose of life?" No, he doesn't say that. He says, "The purpose of life is joy. Don't you agree?" And I had a kind of like a different philosophy at the time, and I said, "No, I don't agree." He says, "Oh, yeah, you're a liar." And I thought, looking back, that's a very remarkable witnessing technique. But we parted company. But I spoke with him long enough to understand that he was a member of a community called the Unification Church, which I had heard of. And he invited me back to the house. And I said, "I'm on my way to the bank, but if you want to get off the bus with me here, let me get some money out, and then we'll get back on the next bus." But he said, "No, I don't have time for that." So we parted company. But 3 months later, actually in San Francisco, I met the movement and joined. And these are just random events in Thailand, but both happened in Thailand, actually, interestingly enough. The woman had prayed for me, and it fundamentally altered the course of my life. And I think probably if I hadn't joined the movement, I might not be here. Well, I certainly wouldn't be here speaking to you today if I hadn't joined the movement, but I might not even be alive to tell the story. So there's a lot of other stories that I can tell, but in the interest of time, let's move on. So how does it work? You know, how do these things happen? Now, a lot of it depends on your view of the world. And we go through life, we have experiences, and we try to find a way of making sense of those experiences. Now, we come across different ideas, different teachings, but for a large part of the world, people don't even see the connection, or they think, oh, coincidences happen in life, just accept it. All these things are happening in life. So there's sure to be some coincidences. And it's only our mind that then draws the connection between them and makes the narrative and the story. And that might be a perfectly reasonable and true explanation. I don't know. I'm not assessing these other than to say some things I found make more sense to me. But superstition, the dictionary definition is widely held but irrational belief in supernatural influences. Now, I'm not going to go into some of the things that happen inside our own movement and some of the things we believe, but I would hazard a guess that there's quite a lot of superstition in our lives. But I'd like to talk a little bit about Buddhism, because this whole idea of cause and effect probably raises the idea in your mind of karma. I don't know if anyone here has familiarity with some of the Buddhist teachings, but they are very, very sophisticated when it comes to this idea of cause and effect. And they have a diagram called the Wheel of Dependent Origination. And it goes around in 12 stages, and it shows how one thing leads to another. And from the Buddhist viewpoint, everything is conditioned. All action is conditioned. So, what will happen depends on the feeling that arose when something else happened, etc. If you want to investigate it, I'm sure there's a lot of literature out there, but it's interesting. But Buddhists have a view that of rebirth, not reincarnation, because they don't believe in the existence of a soul that exists. But basically, karma is transferred from one lifetime to another through a process they call rebirth. I think the unificationist view is the most powerful. And I think that we're familiar with this, and especially because of our view of eternal life, but the influence of the spiritual world in our lives. And it can start to make sense of how these things happen. It could be that the spiritual world were just waiting for an opportunity to show me something about face cloths, and when the opportunity arose, they persuaded this young girl to use the downstairs bathroom instead of going upstairs. But it's sort of remarkable how some things can fit together. We have the idea of original, inherited, collective, and personal sin. Sin in unificationism is any thought or action that takes you further away from God, and the opposite takes you towards God. Now, Father spoke a lot, especially in the later years, about conscience as our guide, because ultimately we can't really know all the effects of our actions before we start to take them. But if we can learn to listen to our conscience and be disciplined enough to follow the messages, then I think Father understands that we can lead good lives and we can lead lives that take us closer to God. So before I conclude, I would like to address a difficult question, the apparent paradox in life. So people will say to you, oh, well, I'm a really good person, so why are all these terrible things happening to me? Or, oh, look at that person, they live really rotten lives, but they've been so blessed. I mean, you know, they've got all this wealth or whatever it is. Say a couple of things. One is, actually, we don't know what happens in other people's lives. Things may look good on the outside, but underneath there may be all sorts of struggles. Interestingly, within the last year, or year or two of the wealthiest people in the world got divorced. Their marriages broke down. Maybe where Bill and Melinda Gates, done so much together, so many amazing things, got divorced. Jeff Bezos got divorced, and in the kind of settlement, his wife ended up with $60 billion, and she's giving a lot of it away to charity. Some of them pretty dubious in my estimation, but you know, it's her money. The other thing is we do actually carry the weight of history with us, and we know this from the principle, this idea of collective sin and ancestral sin. And the other side is ancestral merit. If we come from a long line of righteous people, then we can have a lot of merit behind us. So these are things that we need to really consider. We can't look at other people and make assessments about their life, but we can make assessments about our own. And I came across a really lovely quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's been picked up, I think, and reused. But you may have heard this. Sow a thought and you reap an action. Sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. So that's so true. Actually, it all starts with the way we think. It all starts with the habits that we form. And as we get older, it gets more and more difficult to change our thinking and break our habits. But we're never too old. We're never too old. So, you know, we can be reborn every day. So, what is our destiny? Now, clearly, there are some people who we call men and women of destiny, and they live amazing lives, and through their lives, they affect the lives of so many others. But each one of us has a destiny too. And I think that destiny is quite simple to define. So, my destiny is to become a being of heart guided by my conscience. Because that's the real value that we have in life. You know, we get to the end of our life, we go into the spiritual world. But we hope that we have not left any resentment behind. We hope that we've moved a lot of people, but that we've become a person of good heart. And that is also, I believe, living in accordance with God's will. So thank you very much for your attention.